Rob Thompson Sports Biz podcast. We got a great guest on tonight and someone who is making a major impact in the sports tech startup space. Michael Proman. Hello. Proman. Hello.
How you doing? I've been called a lot worse, Rob, so you're good to go on that.
It's just one of these days today. It's just one of these days.
Oh, listen, it's all good.
And the worst part about it is your name is spelled right in front of me too.
Yeah, Proman, Broman. As I said, Abe Froman. I'm the Sausage King of Chicago sometimes.
Froman. I love that. Well, listen, it was, all seriousness, it was great catching up with you before this call, and I'm glad we were able to do that because now it helped me kind of frame in a lot of my questions. I want to get right to it, and I definitely want to talk a lot about the sports startup tech space. And you came in through the NBA, the NFL, NBA, Coca-Cola. You were both on the brand side, right, and on the media event side. And then you came in through, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase here, software side of it, technology, and then startups and VCs, and you've kind of done it all in the business world. And I know I kind of squished that in real quick because I want you to talk and tell us about it. So why don't you tell us about your journey? Start there. So you start wherever you want and kind of how you got to where you are now.
Sure. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I'm no different than a lot of kids back in the day, right? Played sports. What do you want to do when you grow up? Well, I'm not going to be an athlete, that's for sure. I think I kind of peaked when I was in probably seventh grade. It was all downhill from there, although I was fortunate to play college football at Amherst College. And so, I think for me personally, it really came down to how do you fuse some of your passion points together? And for me at the time, it was Chinese language and cultural skill set I had and sport. And so back in, this is, the early 2000s, 2001, 2002, Beijing had just been awarded the 2008 Olympics. And I said, well, if I could combine two of those things together, where do they kind of align? And that inflection point was really the 2008 Olympics in Beijing. So how do I get there, right? And so I think, this is pre-LinkedIn. This is pre, any type of digital platform for networking. I think I was probably on like the 54th page of Google search. And, lo and behold, I end up scoring a pretty great gig at Coca-Cola working on their Olympic property as well as FIFA World Cup and the NBA. And, just working with exceptional people, I think, and people that are just iconic within that space, and then just good leaders too, and people you can learn from. So from Coke, I transitioned, I went to the property side at the NBA. The time I got to the league, I think we had like 2 people on the ground in China. So it was kind of like, what's going on? And they kind of said, okay, well, you help figure it out. And that was in about 4 years. When I left there, we had 125 people on board. We had just spun NBA China off, valued at multiple billions of dollars. And the trajectory of the league hasn't slowed down since. So it's a very global game, as you know. I think after the NBA, I was kind of at my own inflection point and said, hey, what do I want to do, right? And I think I've always been a blank canvas type of person, not really playbook. And for me, that was really about starting a company at that point. And this was before sports tech was cool. In fact, I think you'd go to a conference and you'd find like a dozen of the same people. So it was kind of boring, but at the same time, it was pretty exciting.
Right.
Partnered with a former colleague from the NBA to start a company called Optionit, which we ended up selling in 2011, so about 3 years later. And then from there went on just to consult to some really interesting businesses around the world. And in that time, the industry started to mature even more. You start to see kind of different lines in the sand, and you really saw more of a path forward. So that was really exciting. And up until about a year and a half ago, that was my arena. It was a great space. I still am very closely connected to a lot of founders and entrepreneurs. But now I get to see it from a VC lens, and which is even more exciting because you actually have a checkbook to write, some money out the door. But what we do at Scrum is a little bit more non-traditional than your average VC. Yes, we have funds and we deploy capital. Spoiler alert, though, the funds themselves are tech agnostic. They're not sports tech funds. So we're not necessarily a sports tech VC by any means. That being said, a lot of our LPs and our partners at Scrum are big Japanese companies, ones that a lot of people are very familiar with. And what we've been able to do with those partners is help them innovate on the business line. And so when Dentsu came to us in the summer of 2018, just over about a year ago now, and said, well, we have Rugby World Cup coming to the region, we have the Olympic Games in 2020, we'd like to create something that hasn't been done before in sports tech and really celebrate that industry. I was all in. And quite honestly, the vision that we've been able to architect and then execute against has been pretty remarkable. Just to think that a year ago, if we were having this discussion today, none of this existed. We built what I would liken as a sports tech community, not an accelerator. I'll share a little bit more about that in a little bit, but it all starts with kind of identifying some of the problems that exist. And I think when you're in that space on the front lines in a management role, you can see those things pretty clearly. I think it really comes down to fragmentation. Companies are very fragmented in the space by stage or size. Some of the fragmentation originates by just location or region. And then the last one is the industry has grown so quickly and is so robust right now that there's so many different categories. So you can have companies that are in AR, VR, not know somebody in an esports segmentation or a social content space, although they still all operate in the what we call a fan engagement capacity. So, it was about kind of breaking down some of those barriers. And so Sports Tech Tokyo, well, it's called Sports Tech Tokyo, is really more of a global celebration of the sports tech community. It's saying we want to find best-in-class companies across three core buckets, one being athlete performance, one being stadium experience, and one being fan engagement. Those break down 13 different ways, which is a much longer conversation. But then bringing those companies together and curating the best and brightest against some of our partners on the corporate side in Japan. So not only is Dentsu involved at a very high level, but we work with the Tochu Corporation and SoftBank and Sony Music and CBC and Microsoft. And as a startup, I think one of the challenges they've always had with what was kind of seen as an accelerator is that it requires relocation, right? It requires me giving up some equity. And quite honestly, that's a non-starter for a lot of folks. And so what we've designed is really a virtual program, one that doesn't require equity and one that is all about top line growth and value. Something that a lot of these startups are badly need of. When you start talking or localizing that in APAC and Japan in particular, it's a very relationship-centric region. And because of that, it's very challenging for some of these startups, no matter if they're pre-revenue or they're mid or late stage, to realize revenue or in some cases, optimize revenue. Everyone wants to be there, right? You have the next two Olympic Games taking place on Asian soil. You have Cricket World Cup, you have so much excitement in Southeast Asia, but it's about finding a path over. So Sports Tech Tokyo is really about a gateway to the marketplace. It's about enabling the startup community to realize real opportunities. But it's more than that, right? We've created a mentor network of over 100 industry thought leaders who are representative of brands and teams and leagues and properties, media, you name it, right? And people you just want to get to know. And so our feeling is that everybody needs acceleration. And traditionally, everyone has said that's called an accelerator. But our feeling is acceleration is applicable to everyone and anyone. We just have to design the right community for that. And so that's what Sports Tech Tokyo truly is.
So talk a little bit about that, a founder's journey. I have an idea and I'm reaching out to your group and I think are you taking in that early stage? Or are you looking a little bit more for a mature?
Sure. So, on the Scrum side, right, as far as our investment strategy, we're traditionally between kind of seed and A. We don't lead on rounds. We like to co-invest with a lot of very notable folks. But again, we're tech agnostic. Yeah. So, that's one side of kind of the playbook. And then the other is really what we call Scrum Studios. And that's that kind of corporate incubation accelerator-esque program. That is, again, I would say stage agnostic. So I think the number one thing you have to identify when you talk about founder's journey is what is something that unites a pre-revenue company with a late stage company? There are not many things, but we've nailed it to 2 points, right? It's about revenue and relationships. Nobody is going to turn down those two things. Somebody may say, yeah, I need equity. I don't want equity. Somebody might say, I need to relocate or need to get involved here or do that. But you know what? If you give somebody those two things, that's what brings a community together.
Mm.
And the best part about Sports Tech Tokyo, in my estimation, is in some respects, accelerators are great because they bring people together. I mean, Stadia runs an amazing program, right? And Techstars has one now in sports. But it's kind of what happens after that accelerator is over. That's the most critical stage. And I think, going back to your question before is, Founder's Journey is also about pain points, and it's about identifying those pain points and those problems. We talked about fragmentation. Well, one of the biggest challenges right now in the marketplace today is, capital raise. And it's capital is somewhat commoditized, and it's easy to get $1 million or $2 million in terms of friends and family or seed in the door. But what used to be a $2 to $3 million A round when I was raising capital with Optionate, back in 2009 or 2010, has turned into a $8 to $10 million A round, right? And so you just do the math really quickly, right? If you have $1 million in AARR, right, then a $10 million round, I mean, your valuation has to be through the nose. And so the problem is there's not enough top line growth within the industry right now to support some of the valuations. So our feeling is let's give people what they need, and that's revenue. And fundamentally, nobody's going to turn that down.
Yeah, it's very, who would, right? And relationships, like you said, it's not always on just a money grab or stroking a check. Am I taking investment from a partner that truly has relationships in the industry that could get me the meeting, that could get me in front of folks, that eventually is going to lead to maybe not a piece of business right away, but maybe another door that can open up. So I love to say all the time, just don't chase. It's very easy to accept money from people that want to help you, or money that believe in you or believe in your product. But it's another thing, it may not be the right fit. And I think it's like a marriage, and there's going to be arguments, and there's going to be frustrations. There's going to be celebrations. But it's much more than just the paycheck. I mean, and then how do you guys look at that?
I think that's exactly how we look at it, to be quite honest. I mean, there are a lot of VCs out there that love to do months of diligence. Then they might write you a check, and then their MO is showing up at a quarterly board meeting and busting your chops about how you're not doing this or why you're doing this, right? And again, that's just somebody else's MO, but that's not ours, right? Mm-hmm. The way I look at the world, and I think the way we look at the world, is we're just an extension of the management team, right? Is that I'm just as happy rolling up my sleeves, kind of in some cases sacrificing my time or things that may seem below me, right, as a VC, for the betterment of a portfolio company, because I know that these relationships transcend time. And more importantly, if I can't feel like I personally, and I know this kind of sounds arrogant, but I think when I say I speak for my network too. If I personally can't influence the outcome for one of these companies, what am I doing investing in it, right? It's like going to a sports book in Vegas and saying, well, if I could change that line slightly,
right,
that makes it much more intriguing, right? Mm-hmm. The likelihood of it paying off goes up exponentially. And I think that's really the essence of Sports Tech Tokyo, and kind of where we're going in 2020 is that we've assembled a community of not only best-in-class companies, but great mentors and people within this network that we can lean on and rely on, and it can give us invaluable insights and just extraordinary relationships as well. And if those things are kind of the differentiator or the thing that puts XYZ company over the edge, phenomenal, right? I mean, I'm just a very operational guy.
Talk about this before I forget. I want to throw this out there. How do people find out more information about your program?
Yeah, so sportstech.tokyo is a pretty definitive source. Yep. We're very active, obviously, on Twitter and LinkedIn and other networks as well. But I think, just Google it is what I would encourage you. And just, there's a lot of third-party information out there. And to me, that's the most unfiltered, unbiased opinion. I mean, in my estimation, I'm always very cynical, right? I feel like if you're going to really deliver value for one audience, you're probably not for the other two or three that are, stakeholders. And that's just not the case here. I think fundamentally we have to look each other in the mirror and say, what's the value prop from a startup perspective? Why as a mentor do I want to join, right? Because that's an interesting one, right? Mentorship has always been seen as a one-way street, I think, for way too long. And I think it's a fundamentally antiquated model where it's like me saying, hey, Rob, will you give me 3 hours of your time every week to basically unload your contacts and your insights and everything? And oh, by the way, we're doing it because you want to feel good about the fact. And you're a great guy and you're an altruistic guy and you want to see the industry succeed. So you'll probably do it, right? But at the end of the day, time is a premium for everybody.
Currency.
No matter who you are, right?
Yep.
And there needs to be a transaction. And that's the way we've set up our mentor community. We don't have any prerequisites. We don't have any, minimums of me saying you have to do X, Y, and Z. What we feel we've assembled here, and again, this is not out of any arrogance, this is just the truth in my estimation, is we feel that we've assembling such a strong community of early stage companies that our mentors want to lean into that community because we're fundamentally helping them do their day jobs or we're making them better within the industry itself. So, one of our mentors works at Nike in a global innovation capacity, and he can come to me and say, hey, Mike, who are the 3 or 4 companies that you feel most strongly about in this particular category, right? And so for him to have that outlet, he's more than happy to get on the call with, 2 or 3 companies and talk to them and understand their business and see if there are ways to work together. To me, that's the true kind of definition of mentorship, is where there's that transaction going on and both parties really feel valued. I think at the same time, look at our corporate partners, right? Is that, could a Tochu Corporation, for example, would they have the resources in-house to be able to curate the global sports tech community for the companies that are best aligned with their opportunities and pain points? Probably not. And so being able to come to somebody like a Sports Tech Tokyo, come to Scrum and say, you know what, you can help us just as much as we can help some of these companies too, that's a really powerful statement. So I feel at the end of the day, if we can't look everybody in the eye and say there's true value, then we probably shouldn't be doing what we're doing. And I'm really proud of what this team has been able to accomplish in a very short amount of time.
Absolutely. You guys are making a major impact. I mean, obviously the brand name and, Sports Tech Tokyo it's been bubbling up a lot. And, there's a lot, you have your network of great mentors and I do know a bunch of them. And this is one thing I think is important for people to know. So if I'm a startup and I'm trying to figure out how this whole process works, and for those that get into your funnel, what are the steps of I'm interested, I've applied to be part of it, and I want to get all the way down to your demo days, and what are the steps to get there and what happens?
Well, it's a moving target right now, so I hesitate to tell you because right now we're in the later stages of making some big announcements for 2020, so things look a little bit different. But I can tell you kind of what we built in 2019, which really started at the end of 18, was this idea that we wanted to build a community, and we've kind of populated that community now with those companies. And we had hundreds of applications for a program, as you said, and had zero brand equity, didn't exist. So that to me is telling that we've kind of stumbled upon a bigger issue in the industry. From that, we accepted 159 companies representing of 23 countries around the world.
Wow.
Different areas of interest in the space itself, right? I think what we ended up doing, we took over 100 of those companies over to Tokyo this last spring in April. And we identified a dozen of them that we called program finalists. Now, the reality is any one of those 159 companies could have been a finalist. They're all excellent. I think the ones we selected just simply aligned with the opportunities that our partners had exposed. We've worked with their entire cohort. There are a number of partnerships that have come from companies that weren't finalists, right? And those are ones that we're really proud of as well. We ultimately, everything culminated about a month ago at World Demo Day in San Francisco, which was fabulous. But it wasn't your traditional demo day. Again, it was more of a celebration of the industry and the cohort itself. As we look ahead to 2020, we'll continue to broaden this community. We'll continue to grow it, both on the startup side, both on the mentor side. But we'll also be introducing a number of very exciting pieces. I think one of the things that we always think about when you're talking about startups is growth capital and making sure that these companies have the resources to get to that next level. So that'll be a core point of kind of 2020. Everyone says, why do you call it Sports Tech Tokyo, right? It kind of seems like, well, after 2020, what are you going to call it, right? This is about the legacy that Tokyo is leaving. Let's just be very clear about that, right? So this is not just we're out of here come August 2020. We see opportunities across the entire APAC region, right? So this may be more focused around China, let's say in 2021. It could be India in 2022. It could be Southeast Asia. So there's just broad-based opportunity that we're tapping into and interest. And that's the excitement on my side, right? I mean, it kind of originated for me, kind of taking it full circle here, Rob. I started taking Chinese when I was 11 years old. And so that area of the world became kind of a focal point. And so to kind of revisit that, almost 30 years later, geez, I'm dating myself, it is pretty remarkable. So a lot of excitement, a lot of growth, and a lot of big announcements to come here just in the next few months heading into the new year.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait to hear the announcements. I appreciate your time. I know you got a hard stop here at 6:30, and as an experienced podcaster now, I got you right on the nose at 6:30. So
well, you're a professional in so many different ways. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it, and look forward to staying in touch for sure.
Oh, absolutely, Michael. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm so happy we got this chance to visit together. And I wish you best of success moving forward.
You got it. Take care.
We'll see you now.
Thanks.